Thanks for joining me. You know, I remember back in 1990 feeling a sense of trepidation and concern when, in a lame duck session, Congress went ahead and passed the Immigration Bill of 1990. Almost no public debate. People didn't know what was in the bill. And that bill was very significant. It set off what turned out to be a stream and then an ongoing sustained wave of foreign labor through a various set of programs that are now routinely abused and used to displace American workers. And unfortunately, young Americans today don't even understand what happened. The result of that bill in 1990 has been echoing with us ever since, really, for many, many years. And part of the reason is, once you set off an immigration policy, a process, it tends to ramify and grow. Over time, consequences grow out of control. The limited foreign labor provisions of the 1990 bill eventually became a highly dependent foreign labor pool that multinationals now insist they get access to in order to, they maintain, remain competitive globally. Additionally, one of the things that foreign labor bill has allowed to happen is that American education has gone down the drain. Young people today are spending time with things like critical race theory and not learning basics and moving into the STEM fields. The rigorous discipline of excellence and merit, all these things are being compromised. Now, why would multinationals allow that to happen? They have allowed it to happen because they don't really care about what happens in American education anymore. As Bloomberg recently noted, they believe they have the right to just import foreign labor. And it all started in this 1990 immigration bill in the dead of night without any public debate. And I remember the feeling of helplessness as at FAIR we tried to alert the American people about what was in the bill. Well, I'm here to tell you that right now I have this same sense of trepidation and concern, because the Democrats, as a party, on a partisan basis, are preparing to try to enact the largest amnesty bill in the history of the United States. Without a single Republican vote, they're trying to cram it through what's called the Budget Reconciliation Bill, a little-known provision that allows them to pass it in the Senate without any Republican votes, without 60 votes, simply majority vote. This is part of that $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill, quote unquote. The Democrats have crammed everything in the kitchen sink into climate change and all kinds of things that are denominated human infrastructure, because apparently infrastructure doesn't mean roads and bridges. It just means anything and everything they want it to mean, including potentially a $500 billion or $1 trillion amnesty provision. Now, what's so bad about the amnesty provision? Well, not only would it give potentially green cards or attract to citizenship for up to 10 million immigration lawbreakers, maybe more. The estimates all vary. Nobody knows how many people are here illegally, how many illegal aliens are in the United States. Biden administration doesn't call them illegal aliens anymore because they want to eliminate what remains of immigration law. It also removes per country caps, allows much larger family chain migration to follow as a result of that. And so what may be initially 10 million people can eventually turn into 30 million people. Also, because all those people will now be eligible for federal benefits, the cost of the amnesty will be, as the Democrats themselves say, to justify putting it in a budget reconciliation bill, hundreds of billions of dollars, $150 billion or more maybe over time. Depending on how far out you go, obviously the big costs of Medicare, Part A, and Social Security, all these things kick in over many, many years. But in the end, it's of course a massive fiscal drain for the American people, as you admit more and more low-skilled people who've been in the country illegally. If you reward illegal lawbreakers, a lot of things happen. As we saw in 1986, more illegal immigration happens. To do this at the time today, now when we have a border crisis of a historic dimensions and one that the Biden administration doesn't seem to care about fixing, is really, I mean, we're so far beyond outrageous at this point. The maladministration of this administration is without precedent. They don't care about whether people come illegally or not. They don't care about the administration of the law. They don't care about prosecuting lawbreakers. They don't care about whether people conform themselves to the conduct of the law. We're talking about passing a mass amnesty bill at the same time the Department of Homeland Security is essentially making up the law, admitting aliens under what they call parole without any kind of limit, even though Congress has said it has to be limited, fighting in the courts to try to make sure that the Department of Homeland Security can have the discretion to simply pretend the law doesn't exist. Now, if the Trump administration denies admission to an alien the ACLU thinks they're entitled to come in, they'll litigate that thing to the Supreme Court. But the courts have this attitude, if the Attorney General or the Department of Homeland Security is going to just relax the standards and let people get phony asylum claims approved, or rubber stamp fraudulent claims of one kind or another, or simply let people run across the border, the American people seem to be powerless to try to stop it. Now the Democrats are saying that there will be no bipartisan discussion about the largest full-scale mass amnesty immigration acceleration provision in American history. The implications of what they're trying to do through the budget reconciliation bill will ramify through generations. Your children, your grandchildren will not be able to get a good job for a very simple reason. All the patterns we've seen in widening income disparity, in widening gaps between rich and poor, and the disappearing middle class will be accelerated. This will enhance and increase welfare dependency among the foreign-born and take away forever the American people's ability to decide who and how many immigrants come in any given year. History has not been kind to nations which have lost control of their borders. Over the last 40 years, I have watched as the United States has gradually lost control of the immigration process. We have an immigration court system that doesn't function. The backlogs are unimaginable. They don't work. Biden administration doesn't care how long these backlogs take. People come into the country, then they can petition relatives to join them while they wait for a hearing that may never happen. And then by the time the hearing comes up, they've established roots in the country and then say, you can't remove me because I've got roots in the country. So, clearly we're at that kind of inflection point in American history where the United States is either going to have an immigration control system that works or it doesn't. The way the Biden administration is going now, we're not going to have one. Now, what can be done to stop what the Democrats are doing? Well, the options are fairly limited. There are many things that moderate Democrats may not like in this $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill has a lot of stuff that people aren't going to like somewhere along the way. But the problem is when you're tossing around that kind of money, the Democratic leadership will simply buy people off by promising them things in the district. So we hear a lot about Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia. We hear a lot about Kyrsten Sinema, who's obviously a more moderate Democrat from Arizona. Are they really going to say no, or are they just waiting to get their cut of the table? Are they saying, this is what I've got to deliver for my voters, right? What kind of package? And, Chuck Schumer knows how to wheel and deal. He'll figure out a way to get those votes. So how else could you get them to kick out the amnesty? Well, during the markup in the House Judiciary Committee, Republicans tried to put amendments in that would eliminate amnesty for criminals, sex offenders, people who are drunk drivers, gang members, and other things, which would have helped at least establish standards. We're in the midst of a program where we're bringing in Afghan nationals, and some refugees, some SIV people who worked with our troops, and then people who don't even know who they are. You trust Mayorkas and DHS to vet these people? I certainly don't. And do you trust them to do proper screening of aliens in an amnesty of the kind they're talking about? I certainly don't. What happens if they pass this thing and Biden signs it in the Rose Garden? Not a single Republican vote. No bipartisanship on an issue of such incredible national importance. Well, it does several things. One, it finally destroys public confidence in the immigration control system. Just like the electoral process will have thrown it to Mark Zuckerberg and these plutocratic billionaires who decide they want to run our political system. Just like the voting procedures that were manipulated by Zuckerberg in the last election, we now see the immigration policy being manipulated as well. You see the advertisements all the time from Forward US, that's Zuckerberg's funding. It also, of course, destroys immigration enforcement for the next 10 years or more. Any alien with a prima facie case claiming that they're qualified has to be given the benefit of the doubt to pursue the claim. There's basically not going to be any immigration law enforcement while aliens are pouring across the border. It sets up another scenario where Congress's role will simply be reduced to grandfathering in whatever number of people have come into the country and refused to leave. There will no longer be any sovereign control over the question of who, how many immigrants, and how these rules are enforced any longer. This bears watching. You certainly need to make sure your member of Congress knows how you feel about sticking an amnesty bill in a budget bill. You need to tell them you oppose the idea of any immigration provision in a budget bill. Not the place for it, nothing appropriate about it. If the parliamentarian sides with us and says these are not appropriate, you want to make sure Chuck Schumer hears from you that he should respect the decision of the parliamentarian, not fire her or replace her, or in turn around and vote that recommendation down. There are good and sound reasons why the Senate has the procedures it does. On issues like national defense, foreign policy, immigration policy, there's a need for bipartisan consensus on how we go. The fact that that bipartisan consensus has been difficult to achieve over the last 20 years doesn't mean the policy that could be brought about as a result of that consensus is bad. What it means is that the two sides at the table have been making demands that seem irreconcilable. Now, my perspective, of course, and the perspective here at FAIR, is that what has happened is the Democrats have moved so far to the extreme, including the moderates, from where the party was 20 years ago, that there is no middle ground. The Republicans haven't particularly shifted that much. I don't care what Democrats seem to say about it. Anybody can see videos, sound on tape of Democrats in the 1980s and 90s saying things that sound just like what Donald Trump or Paul Gosar or Andy Biggs or any of those guys would be saying today.
Not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens. In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes, to better identify illegal aliens in the workplace as recommended by the commission headed by former Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. We are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws.
Is that the American people are fundamentally pro-legal immigration and anti-illegal immigration. We will only pass comprehensive reform when we recognize this fundamental concept.
Law is the law. Illegal is illegal. Borders matter. Immigration's not correct. We have to deter it. I mean, all those things were standard operating procedure until quite recently with Democrats. What happened to Democrats? They lost. There's no union support anymore. Private sector unions are essentially gone. They don't really see any need to limit the number of people coming in anymore because their constituents are now made of some peculiar hybrid of constructed minority voters and rich, wealthy elites in these coastal counties. And that's the political base that they have today. It's not a popular base with most of the country at this point. So they've detached themselves from reality, and now they're trying to use immigration to expand the potential electorate in areas of the country where they haven't had a lot of clout. That's why the Biden administration has let the borders run out of control and has no intention at all of stopping it. I'm sure, like you, most Americans are concerned about what's happening on our borders. You should be equally concerned about the lack of vetting of people coming into the country, and you should be very concerned about what the Democrats are doing in the budget reconciliation bill. This is a time to make your voice heard. This is a time for you to speak up and object to what is happening. The news media are talking about a lot of issues, barely talking about this amnesty bill. But yet this amnesty bill has the potential to change the electorate forever. 10 million people is the equivalent of several new states being admitted to the Union. Then there are more people who will follow as a result of this bill. As I say, the consequences will be felt for decades to come. It will change the entire political alignment of the country. Isn't it worth some kind of bipartisan hearings to study what's going to happen? Isn't it worth getting a better analysis of the operational impact on Homeland Security before you enact this kind of thing in the dead of night in the middle of a budget bill? Is it so important to the Democrats that they pass this without any kind of meaningful balance to give the American people even a good faith idea that they're going to try to fix some of the immigration problems that have created the crisis we face now? Do they really not concern at all about the welfare of the country at all, the future of the country, or whether we have a country at all? I mean, these are the questions we're going to be answering in the next few months. But I don't think you want to let it go by without making your voice heard, so I do hope you'll pay attention. Focus on objecting to what they're doing in the Senate and the House on this budget reconciliation bill. Make your voices heard now. I'm Dan Stein. Thanks for listening.